What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another free agency video. Yesterday, we took a look at Shaq Barrett and dove into that player individually, a veteran that was released that I wanted to discuss about a potential, hey, should the Lions go after this guy? And today, that night, after posting that video, I was walking around outside and I was like, you know what? I really want to dive into some of this free agency stuff before free agency really pops off. We're going to be talking about it next week on Bleacher Report, so make sure you tune into that. So I really want to dive in and do some videos for free agency here. And the first one that hit me was like, hey, let's do a little list for defensive tackles. Now, this could absolutely be a part 1 and part 2, and I think the part 2 version would probably be more positions than just this position, so let me point that out. However, this video is going to be about the big name defensive tackles. I say big name because it's not necessarily just the big names. Like, there's big names that could sign one-year deals, or they're more the veteran side where it's like, okay, maybe it's kind of the last run here. Fletcher Cox, for example, if he leaves Philadelphia, he's an available player. I love Fletcher Cox. I love the idea of it. I'd love to have him in Detroit. I love some of the one-year cheaper deals that could potentially be out there this offseason as well. And I think the timeline makes a ton of sense with having Broderick Martin and also William McNeil, who I believe has to get extended. It's a must that the Lions extend that player. However, today I thought the best way to start would be by diving into these players that are projected to get multi-year deals by Pro Football Focus. And a lot of these guys are a little bit on the higher side in terms of how much they're looking for. Now, the best way I thought to do this would be a ranking video. So we're going to be ranking 5 of the largest projected deal free agents at the defensive tackle position. It could vary a little bit to exact rules from 3 techniques to nose tackles to even some guys that play out as a defensive end occasionally as well. We're going to be ranking those according to PFF. However, there's going to be multiple big name defensive linemen that are left off this list because it sounds like they're not going anywhere. So let's get it started. Welcome everybody to our video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we are back with another free agent video, man. I'm pumped up to dive into this one. And as I said at the beginning there, to me, this is a position where it would make a ton of sense if you wanted to go add somebody on a short-term type of deal, if that was possible, where you have William McNeil who should be extended, and I believe that he will be extended, and he's going to take up some of that cap space. You also still have Broderick Martin, who is now going into his second season, and if you don't want to completely, like, put someone on top of him for, like, 3 years and give him a big deal and be like, all right, Martin, I don't know how you're going to find your snaps. You might be a little bit rotational. Instead, leaving that door definitely open, but potentially getting a veteran for a single season, kind of that stopgap piece. I think that makes a ton of sense for the Lions' current situation. However, I thought the best way to start this off was by talking about some of the bigger names. That's what the people want to talk about. And then we could do a second version video of this where we talk about maybe some of the more overlooked names in this market. But I thought this would be the best way to start. Now, key note that I have to make to that is that there are specific players that we will not really dive into today because it just does not sound like the guy is going to be available. First off, Chris Jones. It sounds like the Kansas City Chiefs are prioritizing finding a way to get Chris Jones back. And also, we all kind of know about Chris Jones, so me doing a video on Chris Jones, I feel like I'm not really accomplishing a ton there. He's an elite pass rusher. He's probably, you know, in line to make the most money of any defensive tackle this offseason. They should not let him go. If they do, hey, I'm on board, but they absolutely should not. Also, was the guy that I plan to have on this list, had to take him off, Justin Madubuike, because according to the Ravens, I think a day ago, they basically put it out there that, hey, even if we can't get an extension done, he's likely going to get the franchise tag, so he's not going to be an option. And same kind of thing with Christian Wilkins as well. So some of those top players, those guys specifically, will not be included on this list just because it's almost kind of been made out to be like these guys are just not going to be available. Maybe they are. Could be wrong. If they are, we could talk about them down the line. However, as of now, it sounds like those guys just won't even be available to the market. And there's a chance that guys on this list aren't either. However, that's kind of what we already know, so what's the point of even diving into those? And I hate it because I did some breakdowns on those players, and I was like, oh, okay, they're not going to be available. That stinks. I got to go find somebody else. But that's fine. We still got some big names here, and I think this makes more sense because these are not necessarily the top of the market guys that everybody knows about. You might know about these guys or know of them, but you don't really know about these players, and that's what we're going to dive into today. Now, the ranking system honestly isn't that important. Kind of just ranked in terms of what projected deal I like best based on what Pro Football Focus is laying out there, based on also the player that I watched. Like, okay, do I like that deal for what production I'm going to get back in return? And I kind of ranked them in that order. So with that being said, let's dive right into it. We're going to start off at number 5, and this is a defensive lineman that spent last season with a couple different teams, the Houston Texans and the Tennessee Titans, and this is Tart from, most recently, the Houston Texans. Now, it was a weird end there to the relationship with the Tennessee Titans. It sounded like there was contract issues. He wasn't happy about his current contract situation, and then there was questions that I guess were being brought up about the effort that he was giving and how much effort he was putting towards wanting to come back through an injury. So because of that, it kind of ended weird. He ultimately got released by the Tennessee Titans. They were very light on the defensive line. They actually brought in a guy like Quentin Bohanna at one point. They were very light on the defensive line, and then he went and signed with the Houston Texans. Didn't play a ton there, but played a little bit towards the end of the year for the Houston Texans, who was actually the next team that I believe that he faced as soon as he got to the Houston Texans. But this just ended really rough. From what I was able to gather, it sounds like he was a great teammate. Teammates loved this guy. The media seems like they really love Tart as well, but it seems like it may have started with the contract situation, and then because of that, there was questions about, is he really trying to be here? Does he want to be here? That kind of thing, and ultimately he was just kind of let go, and it was a bad season last year for the Tennessee Titans overall. With that being said, though, this is a guy that also has a direct connection to our new defensive line coach, Leonard Williams, as he was their defensive line coach last year, and according to what I was able to gather, he would not comment on the Tart situation, basically just laying it out there that he's unavailable. And because of that, it doesn't sound like this would necessarily be a guy that he would be pushing for, like, hey, go get that guy. I don't know, though. This could be a player where he's like, look, it was a contract situation issue, but we like the players, so hey, if you guys can get a contract and a deal done with him, I'd like to have him in my room. I don't really know what his take is on this player, but I get the sense that it's probably not great. So for that reason, really just that reason alone, I ended up putting him down here all the way at the bottom at number 5 on this list. Now, also, when you look at what PFF is projecting that Tart get paid this offseason, 3 years, $10.5 million per year. These numbers aren't necessarily crazy, and this was also before we got the exact cap number. These numbers aren't crazy because the cap has just flown so high up, and obviously, again, you could set these deals up a little bit, but it does feel a little bit high here for Tart. The biggest thing I would say point to that reason is that he's only 27 years old. If this was one of these players that were looking for their third contract, and I guess in a way he was because he got a 1-year deal, but being only 27 years old kind of feels like he's coming off like that rookie deal in a way, and him being in that range where not a lot of the top defensive tackles are, that could be the difference if a team is looking to give out a multi-year deal where they're willing to spend a little bit more because they like the age range that Tart falls into. Now, when I watch him at 6'2", 304 pounds, he could even be a little bit heavier than that. This is actually a guy that coming out of college was more of a pure 3-tech defensive tackle, but he's transitioned into being a nose tackle specifically in the NFL. Now, he's shown the flexibility to kind of do both, but he's been a lot of a nose tackle. 1 technique, some 2 eyes, 0 technique specifically for the Tennessee Titans, and I thought where he brought the most value from what I watched, and you can see it through the production as well, was definitely the run defense. Year past 2022, obviously you could see the pressure numbers. They were pretty solid, and he is definitely a guy that could impact as a pass rusher. So starting there first, this was an area where I gave him a below average grade just in terms of a pure pass rusher from an interior piece. However, within his role, it's actually not too bad. He's the type of player that seems to have a pretty nice sense of offensive line sliding so he can step in front of it. He has an adequate get off, especially in terms of timing off the line of scrimmage, and this is also a player that has some of that ability to kind of knife through the offensive line, create a little bit of just messiness in the backfield. He's not a guy that seemingly has a deep tool bag of pass rush moves that's got a ton of shake in his rush. I do think that he has good quarterback vision, and he can occasionally just give you some pressure from the interior, kind of work through some contact, get some pressure in the interior, and just rep some things. So he's not going to be an elite pass rusher, but he can give some effectiveness there. But like I said, where I thought he made his money for sure was run defense specifically. Now, there were knocks that I had, like occasionally you would see him get off the line, he would just be completely unbalanced. There was a play that I was watching where he just fell on the ground. I was like, what the heck just happened right there? So there were instances like that, but for the most part, I thought he played with pretty good leverage off the line of scrimmage, tied along with nice power as well. You see his ability to handle single blocks, especially against the Indianapolis Colts, who have some really good interior offensive linemen. It's a very effective ability to shed off offensive linemen, kind of stack and get off of that. He quit bend. It really shows up when he's trying to handle double teams. Also, as I touched on, the get off to me, the quickness specifically was very sufficient. It was something that you could absolutely work with as a run defender and as a pass rusher. I thought laterally he didn't move the same. Sometimes you see him kind of fall behind in some like zone blocks specifically, but again, he can get on top of some of the slide protection by just having good recognition, and he carried some of that leverage with him off the snap. So this is a guy that was an effective run defender, didn't really get pushed around on the interior specifically, and he handled single blocks really well. To me, what's the value here for the Lions? It's the value of, at his size, he's the type of piece that, one, could play in a couple different spots, so he can slide around our defensive line when we play 2 eyes and 3 techniques. He He could do both. He's comfortable in a 2-eye technique. He'd give us an improved run defender from what we've seen recently to pair along with Liam McNeil. Now, if Broderick Martin's an animal, then great. But this is a player that, from what we've seen so far, would be an improvement as a run defender on the interior from what we've had. He's not going to give you an elite pass rusher. Obviously, you're still leaning into more there with a Liam McNeil, but he's also not a guy that doesn't do anything as a pass rusher. He'd probably give you more upside, maybe, than even Broderick Martin does. But with that being said, I thought Broderick Martin could add some value a little bit as a pass rusher coming out of the draft with his length and just his crazy effort that he would give. So it could end up being similar if Broderick Martin's able to reach his potential in the NFL. But I think he would be an upgrade specifically as a run defender, and he wouldn't be elite, but he would make us better there, and he'd be a real stable piece. So to me, if the contract's not crazy, this is someone that I actually don't hate the idea of. I actually kind of like the idea, plus he's still pretty young. It's just, what is that connection like with the defensive line coach? I don't think it's fantastic, and because of that, I put him at the bottom. That moves us on to number 4. This is probably one of the bigger names that sounds like they're going to be available, and the reason being is because it's going to be hard for this team to get him back outside of an extension. The franchise tag doesn't seem likely at all because of how much it would actually cost Seattle. I've read it could cost like $36 million to just have a franchise tag take place here. And now it'd be a little bit crazy to see him actually available because they traded for him this past season at the deadline. So it's like, hey, you gave him a 2nd and a 5th round pick. Now you're letting him become a free agent this offseason. Like, you have to extend that guy. You made the trade. You have to extend him. But he's not the youngest player in the world, pushing 30 years old. However, he's also a guy that's probably going to be looking for some big money. And if Justin Madubuike doesn't become available, Chris Jones doesn't become available, and you're talking about Christian Wilkins, some of the top names, all of a sudden he might be the top name on the market. Like, I thought it was going to be Madubuike. He could probably ask for a ton of money, but it doesn't sound like the Ravens are going to let him go. And if that's the case, this guy could definitely be near the top of the market in terms of just defensive tackle availability. And because of that, his price point could get even higher. But that is Leonard Williams, who was with the New York Giants and was traded to the Seattle Seahawks at 6'5", 302. The first thing that stands out is very clear when you watch him, even just from the numbers. It's his length. This is a former top 10 pick in the NFL draft, and with 34 and over a half-inch arm. Also, you also tie in the production that he put up this past season: 54 pressures, 6 sacks, 38 tackles. This guy's been productive pretty much every single year, and he's a good player pretty much every single year. He has the elite physical traits that you love from an interior defensive lineman. We know the Lions like their length in the interior. But, again, the price point is really the key here. Now, when I watch Leonard Williams, why is he a little bit lower of these 5? For me personally, what the projected number is by PFF, which is a 3-year, $17.5 million per year, honestly, that doesn't sound like a crazy number at all. Wouldn't be shocked if it got higher than that. It's not a crazy number, but I haven't completely bought into loving this player. Okay, I like him. I don't love him. And I know we talked about him a little bit at the trade deadline as well, at least on Bleacher Report we did. I like him, don't love him, okay? I kind of have to talk myself into some things at times, and once I start doing that, I'm like, all right, I don't like him as much as I want to like him at that spot, and that's fine. You guys can like him more than I do. That's absolutely okay. I like the player. If he was a Lion, I'd be like, hey, we got a really darn good football player, but for the price point that I think it could get to, I don't love him like that specifically. Now, what I do like about this player, and you talk about those physical traits, easy knee bend, easy flexion. You see it on run defense as well. You'll see it in second effort pass rush wins where it's just like, how the heck did he get to the quarterback like that? There was a nasty play against Philadelphia where you see kind of the bend and his ability to redirect an awkward position, make a play in the backfield. He's got a really nice frame, really good arm length, which makes him effective in, pass lanes for quarterbacks. Also, you just got to get those second effort wins, and he has really good range as a run defender, as a tackler specifically. Wide base footwork that's really quick laterally, so it makes him very effective to defend a lot of different run schemes. And as a run defender, I think he checks a lot of boxes. The production is not always consistent, but I think he checks a lot of boxes in terms of the kind of traits that you would be looking for from a run defender. First off, he's kind of versatile here to me. Now, he's not like the kind of guy that gives me a lot of knockback at the point of attack or consistently gives me drive, and I'm watching him like, oh my goodness, he's a force at the point of attack. I don't get that vibe a ton, which I don't love, but with his length, quickness, which can allow him to get solid positioning, and he also plays with pretty darn good leverage as well for a guy that's usually when a guy's this tall, you can see it and you're like, oh, that's not good. This guy plays with really good leverage off the snap for a guy that's at his height, which leads to really good run defensive reps, which also allows him to not only be a one-gapping upfield type of player with great length that can kind of stride his way through, but can also kind of sit down, play multi-gaps, and then he can make plays on the football that way. Read, react. He has great vision of the running back and kind of hold a block at the point of attack, slide off, shed, and make a play on the running back. So there's a lot that you like there. I love the hip flexion into contact, create some torque there, and it also creates some force and ability to, again, kind of shut off some of those blocks. And he is very capable of working over gas, which I absolutely love. And as I touched on, good leverage at the point of attack, which honestly is one of the most impressive aspects to me of his game. I think a lot of the idea is great, but at times there's just hit and miss results here. I mean, he'll get to do some amazing plays, and there's just some hit and miss. I thought he would be hit and miss at times in terms of just reacting to offensive line movement and then taking a proper entry angle. You'll see this with offensive linemen a lot coming out of the draft, where you'll get like hit and miss, like, okay, he sees it, and then it's like, okay, the way that he got into that block, he didn't really set himself up in a very good position. He'll fall behind on some zone run plays. I do think that he has good play strength, which is very helpful. Now, as a pass rusher, this is where, again, you see the numbers, they stand out as they absolutely should. I don't love that he doesn't have a consistent bull rush, and some of that is height a little bit, but he also gets kind of narrow, and he gets pretty linear, and you don't create a consistent, like, walk back. I also think he's got a very questionable pass rush plan. There's a lot of times where I see him rush, and I'm just like, I don't know if he's coming in with any kind of plan to do here. It just feels like he's kind of just running forward, and then we'll just kind of see what happens. There's a lot of that. Now, these were some knocks coming out of the draft, so, I mean, I'm not expecting, like, a ton of this to change necessarily, but he's one of these guys that I just feel like there's a lot of instances where it's like, I don't really know what his plan is. Doesn't feel as decisive. You don't feel some of the quickness laterally that really pops. You're like, okay, he's just kind of moving forward. And it's like good offensive lines in the interior where centers can kind of knock him off his pass rush route, and then there would be nothing there. His hand usage can be a little bit messy as well. Run defense creating pop, pass rush as well. But where he does stand out as a pass rusher specifically is that he does bring a lot of flexibility. He lines up everywhere on the defensive line, has really good stunt upside, even though, again, sometimes I don't feel like the plan's consistently there. He has real capabilities with his length to go from 1 to 2, swim over here, reach through with my blocks, create a little bit of slither as well. Awesome foot quickness where he can work through blocks, stop, start, make himself just a menace to stick with. He's got a lot of second effort wins. Eventually, he seems like he's going to affect the quarterback at some point. And one of the things I like best is he's very controlled in the interior. You'll see it when he kind of stops screen play specifically, but he pass rushes with a lot of control in terms of his movement.
And I think in the NFL, you just have to expect a guy to consistently find ways to win as a pass rusher. Definitely unlikely unless you're talking about like Aaron Donald, maybe. But in this case, when you see stuff like this, when you talk about length, quickness, good leverage at the snap, and then also just this kind of flexion, which is nasty. So here it's like, okay, the bull rush, I don't love it. And he's starting to walk him back a little bit. And then he flips his hip, torques himself down, great control. And it's like, oh, now here he's on the quarterback. And he has some of that length and also get off ability to then have range. He's a really darn good football player. Let's make that clear.
And then, like I said, he brings really nice foot quickness to the table as well, where you see his easy ability to kind of mirror offensive linemen. Sometimes the angles are hit and miss, but he can mirror offensive linemen with a lot of ease, get on top of front side zone blocks if that's the spot that he's playing from. Even the backside, you'll still see some good in there, even though sometimes the pursuit is just not exactly what I'm looking for. Handle some of those one-on-one blocks. So to me, this is just a good player. You're going to get reps where you're like, oh, that was not good. But he's consistently been very good in the NFL every single year. To me, I don't know that he's been like elite where you're like, oh man, he's just went insane. Like he's pushing that top tier defensive tackle level. And I don't know that you would bank on getting that necessarily, but he's a very good player. So you can kind of bank on that. And he's got the big time traits that I think everybody's looking for an interior defensive lineman. And then he's got flexibility out of it. So he's an awesome player. I think that his market's going to be pretty crazy this offseason, but we'll see on that. How does he tie with the Lions? Well, like some other options on this list, Ali McNeil would have to play a little bit more of the nose tackle role, which he showed the ability to handle because this player not necessarily is going to be consistently built for that, though he does bring a ton of flexibility, and you don't have to take him off the field at all. I mean, you can put him out there on third downs. He could be an impact player. You can put him over a center if you want. You can move him around. He played against tackles at times, so a lot of flexibility. He doesn't need to come off the field, which can help make that value that you're paying him worth it a little bit. So, to me, I don't know if Seattle's going to be able to get the deal done. It doesn't sound like they're going to be able to tag him. And if he does become a free agent, sounds like he might be the top option on the market. All right, let's move over to number 3. And at number 3, man, we have a guy that I really like the fit, to be honest with you. I think you could put this guy at number 2. I kind of went back and forth. Like I said, don't really worry about the rankings too much here. But I'm going to go with Sheldon Rankins out of the Houston Texans this past season. And this is a player that, to me, contract financially, this would make a ton of sense for the Lions. It would. Now, the fit's not like perfect, right? It doesn't fit perfectly, but I do think that he would make a lot of sense financially in where our salary cap is set. 6'2", 305, extremely productive season this past season. You see the numbers there: 40 pressures, 6 sacks, 33 3/8 inch arm length, which is pretty good as well. Pretty big hands as well. And projecting 2 years, $10 million per year is something that I could get on board with. And the reason I could get on board with this is that this is the type of player where at very least we're getting a big-time pass rusher. He is also a former first-round pick, and a lot of this probably will come back to the connections. And how does Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn feel about this? Because this is a player that was with them for years. I mean, he was drafted by the New Orleans Saints, first-round pick back in 2016, spent his first 4 seasons in the NFL with the New Orleans Saints. Then he's been bounced around a little bit since that time. But like I said, this past season, he was an awesome pass rusher. And the fit that's kind of weird to me is just where exactly you line him up, because he does move around a ton, and he's kind of different where some guys are like, I don't know if he could be out there on third down. It's not that he can't be out there on third down. He should be out there on third down. That's where he makes his money. But it's like there's a lot of early downs where teams would just take him out of the game. It's like, let's take him out of the game. Let's not let him run. Let's not let him play the run. We got an answer for that. Instead, let's go with that guy. So it's not that he can't defend a run. It's just that that's not a strong suit. And because of that, it's like, okay, where does the value really lie here? So at a reasonable price, I think it makes a ton of sense. And it could keep the door open with Broderick Martin, because like, hey, well, Broderick balls. And he's like, yo, he's that dude. Even at Broderick's peak when he drafted him, I like some of the upside as a pass rusher, but he's not an elite pass rusher that's going to have all these tricks and like, oh, I can do all that. That's not who he is. But yet a player like this, it's kind of like Fletcher Cox in a sense where it's like he could just rush the passer. I mean, if Broderick was amazing, you have a Lee McNeil, you could just put him out there and rotate to be a pass rusher. As much sub package as you see, he's going to find effectiveness, and he moves around a ton. He beats offensive tackles. So to me, what stood out was obviously the pass rush ability here. And we can start there first, because this is a guy with just elite, great foot quickness, and that's the first thing. Like, you see the first round traits immediately when you start watching this player, and I was like, man, how is this guy 2 years, $10 million? Like, you see the numbers and stuff, you're like, how? And then you start to see the run defense, like, okay, full down usage at times, it can be a little bit hit and miss. But as a pass rusher, man, I mean, he's up there with pretty much everybody that I watch. He's not Chris Jones, but everybody on this list, he's up there, if not better than everybody that I've watched. Really good agility to get on the edge. I think he also can be a really nice stunt piece. He's got real upside there because of some of the foot quickness that he brings. He's got a bull rush ability as well, very capable to set up offensive linemen, kind of get into their chest. He's doing this against good interior offensive linemen too. Could be very quick off the line, kind of open you up, set you up, then get a little bit of drive and kind of knock back. I do think where he lacks a little bit is some of the second effort, like the second plan, right? The first one stalled out. His pass rush can kind of stall a little bit as well. Hand usage can feel like he's kind of just swinging for nothing, and it's like, okay, he's just kind of swiping around, but there's nothing that's actually connecting. But he's just very tough to stay in front of. You talk about a guy with shake as a pass rusher, he absolutely checks all of those boxes. He's got different variety in terms of some of the pacing. He can kind of skip through, get some pass rush laterally, maybe one of the most difficult guys for an interior offensive lineman to stay in front of. And then because of the fact that he can kind of settle himself down and drive you back, he's got legitimate contact balance as a pass rusher, which can help open up some of the upside as a stunt rusher as well. Stays on his feet through traffic consistently. To me, this is just one of the better pass rushers that I've seen in the interior out of any interior defensive lineman I've watched that's going to be available. And like we always say, you really can't have enough of those guys. He's got nice twitch for pass rush. See him out wider. He's very capable of handling his own. If you put him in a DN kind of role and he's playing like a 4-eye, he can get on top of offensive tackles against the run as well. He's got good closing speed, above average closing speed that I would point to as well. And hand placement, kind of like as a pass rusher, initial hand placement can be high. You don't get consistent disengage. That's probably the biggest issue with him, to be honest. Thing I do like, he does get some knockback at the point of attack, some real pop at the point of attack. He's also got an ability to kind of reset his lower body with his footwork and then create some push and pull, disengage ability there. It's not always instant. It could take a second, but as the play goes on, he kind of reset himself, get himself free. Usually, and triangles, again, especially for double team blocks, can be definitely hit and miss. It's kind of weird, but there's still flexibility here because he could play like a DN, D tackle, and at times he played inside of a guard. So there's still some flexibility there as well. He's probably best a little bit wider than he is more so towards the interior against the run specifically. Now, if it is against, the pass and you put him on the interior, yeah, let him work. He's got incredible shake and he could be an absolute problem. I just like the idea. I think it makes sense. I think it absolutely makes sense. I think schematically he could fit, and he's a guy that if the deal's reasonable like that, it can make a lot of sense also with the timeline. So Sheldon Rankins, I like it. I'm putting him at number 3. Definitely could be higher. Honestly, if he was signed by the Lions, I would be hype, and y'all would see that. All right, let's move on to number 2, a guy that I've really liked for a while. And honestly, I think I've moved down a little bit on him in some of the hype train that I've given him. The biggest thing, though, to that is that I don't think the price point's insane here. And that's the thing. If the price point's Leonard Williams, I don't feel the same about this guy. Now, PFS projecting 3 years, $11 million per year. Again, to me, that's not crazy. And this is the type of player that can add more 3-down value than the last player that we talked about. He's definitely not the pass rusher, though, like the last player we talked about. But he does check a lot of those boxes that the Lions have spoken that they like, which is length on the defensive line. Brad Holmes, 6'4", 314, projected 3 years, $11 million per year at 30 years old. That is Grover Stewart. Now, you see those stats, they don't pop as much. One, He honestly had maybe his best pass rush season in his career. 15 pressures doesn't blow you away. He's not really ever been like a monster pass rusher, but he can get some wins. But he did that with also being suspended for the first 6 games. However, you go to last season, you see where the tackles are at, and obviously he was an effective run defender, and that's kind of what he's been. That's what I feel like you get here. You kind of know exactly what you're going to get with Grover Stewart. You just know what to expect, the good, the bad. You know what to expect. And to me, what I like about it, first off, balance, single leg balance. This is a guy that does a nice job kind of keeping his feet on the ground. I think that's very effective. He's very tough to move at the point of attack, and I think that's a very big aspect for that. He's a force at the point of attack that can be just difficult to move in general. He also has an ability to kind of just barrel forward. He played a lot of that 2 technique where he would just kind of drive into a guard and then kind of play off of that. And because that you'd see real movement, his ability to just play behind the line of scrimmage, get off the line, create depth, get low, and then just kind of drive you backwards, kind of barrel in, create a lot of knockback and force. A lateral footwork could be a little heavy. It's kind of why he plays upfield first and laterally first. Makes a ton of sense to me. He also could be a little more linear than a wide-based player, so depending on what you're asking of him, may not always be the best fit specifically. I love the range that he brings. Obviously, a lot of that kind of comes back to length. He doesn't have great closing ability, but he does bring nice range in terms of just the length that he brings, and also the ability to kind of redirect, find the football. Really nice vision for the ball carrier. I think that's one of his standout traits as a run defender as well. Also very effective slant run defender, which a lot of times you think about that as a pass rusher. Effective there as a run defender as well because of how much depth he can actually cover laterally at the snap. And also, again, just the length that he has goes right over top of offensive linemen. He can be knocked off a little bit by down blocks. Like I said, though, I do think he does a nice job always keeping feet in the ground, which helps him a ton. Now, as a pass rusher, again, he doesn't create a ton of leverage for consistent walk back. I think the length here is huge, and that does create some drive ability, affecting passing lanes. Length is just big as a pass rusher. He does create some of that driving force, is that his hands consistently get locked inside, creates a lot of force within the chest so he can get some knockback movement. Can be anchored down, especially as the rep goes on, right? He gets a little bit high, and because of that, they can kind of sink down underneath, sit down, and kind of stall out his pass rush attempt. That brings good effort and pursuit, and as well as good awareness and control, and you saw those things. So to me, it's like, yeah, you're not getting an elite pass rusher, but you know that. As a run defender, there's certain things that he doesn't do well, and if the Lions were like, we kind of want to ask him to do a little bit more of this, I could understand why this is someone that they're necessarily extremely interested in, but in his own role, he's a good player. He's a good player. He's been a good player, and he's been a consistent run defender. And, consistent run defender. Sounds pretty good as a Lions fan. Again, and he brings the measurables. Finally, let's finish it off. Let's go to number 1. And at number 1, and honestly, Justin Madubuike was probably going to be here, but he's not going to be available, it sounds like. So, at number 1, we're going to go with, and he may not have been number 1. We're going to go with DJ Reader, the nose tackle from the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, to me, again, does he become available? I don't know. Like, he sounds like he wants to go back to Cincinnati if they give him that opportunity, if they decide to re-sign him. But this guy is clearly a nose tackle, 6'3", 335. You can see the projected number. It's a little bit lower than Leonard Williams there by a couple mil. 3 years, $15.25 million. And if you're asking why, well, those pressure stats are really darn good for a guy that's known for what he's known for, which is being a run-stuffing nose tackle. 34 pressures. That's a really good stat, especially considering the fact that he had the torn quad at the end of the season. He had, I think, that back in 2020 as well. But when I was just going through and kind of, okay, grade this aspect, grade that aspect, man. To me, what really stood out, first off, run defense. Like, he is a great run defender. Great runner. It doesn't mean he's a great run defender, and he was good in like every single category. I didn't really give him downgrades anywhere. I thought he was a great run defender. Very good quickness, good pass rusher. You see it by the numbers. Not elite, but a good pass rusher. Plays with solid balance as well at times. He'll kind of get caught on the ground a little bit. But, man, the flexibility that he also brings is like, what the heck? Like, he makes some ridiculous plays. So starting off with what he's known for first, run defense, where I absolutely love him. Just a lot of flexibility, bend and sink, the ability to sit down, react to offensive line movement, hold his ground at the point of attack, and play that easy gap and a half style, which we saw the Lions play a lot last season. He can play that role specifically seamless. He's also kind of a seamless fit. You just plug him in next to Willie McNeil, you have an big time into your defensive line. I mean, it's big, and he also fixes maybe one of our biggest issues where you get to the goal line, this guy's going to be a complete different maker as well. So he's such an easy fit. But as a run defender, so many things to like. Not perfect, but so many things to like. Leverage into contact. For that 6'3", looks like he's a lot smaller. I love the flexion, the sink, the ability to work over gaps because that's some of the recognition that he also brings well. Real torque that he brings as well. You see kind of on the shoulder when he's able to disengage, kind of just throw guys off him. And he continues to work with some of the lower body flexion that he also also brings. Now, he can get a little bit tight. Feet can get a little bit tight. Base can get a little bit tight as well. And that's where sometimes I think you'll see sometimes hit and miss balance. You'll see him on the ground a little bit too often. That specifically shows up as a pass rusher attempting to kind of get upfield specifically. But he has real recovery, and this just shows the athleticism. When he's on the ground, he just pops back up, and it's like, oh, he's going again. He's just a handful to deal with. As a pass rusher, I really like him here. Don't love him, I really like him. But he's got some moves to him. First off, he's got the little rip through that he can win with. He knows how to attack an open half man, so he can kind of rip through, get through half man, at the same time create a little bit of that initial knockback. He's not probably a third down piece, but he can be on the field on third down. At certain times they used him there. You're going to pay him. Depending on who's healthy, you might want to put him out there on third down. But you don't have to. He's not a third down piece, but he can play on third down and be definitely sufficient there specifically. He's forceful in terms of that he has very sufficient back bend as well. He continues to work. You'll see him be effective late in the play. You see it here against Baltimore. I mean, he's got a super hot motor. He runs hot all the time. Super hot motor specifically, creates walkback opportunities, and he's effective to attack pass lanes. And then you point to some of the quickness. Now, I don't think he's, got an elite first step. I think it's more so average at best. But lateral quickness to get on top of the scheme, reactionary quickness, those things he checks the boxes of. So to me, like this guy, when you just watch like the movements and the ability in the lower body to just move around like he does, it's like, dang, I can understand. I get it. I get it. This is a big-time run defender. Also, not a bad pass rusher either. Actually, I think PFF graded him much higher as a pass rusher. I think my grades-wise, I think he's a good pass rusher. I think he's a great run defender. Doesn't really have many weaknesses for me. I thought he was pretty darn good across the board, and he fits in pretty seamlessly. So I'm putting him at number 1, DJ Reader. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, because of Aleem McNeil, to me, should get paid, and we have Broderick Martin. But if the Lions were going to go say, let's spend some big money, and if you were telling me, like, okay, those guys you mentioned are not available, who do you want? If I can pick anybody, I'm taking him because it's just such an easy fit for me. The biggest concern would probably be that he's 29 years old on a 3-year deal. Outside of that, based on last season, really darn good football player. So there is your top 5 ranked in terms of multi-year deals that PFF is projecting. They had the others, but the other guys are expected, sounds like, to just return to their team. And the other ones they had listed are 1-year deals. So we can dive into those things separately, but for now, I'm going to leave it there because this video is going to get too long. Thank you, Prod, for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Who intrigues you? And I'm out.